Welcome and thank you so much for our speaker today. We're really excited to welcome Keram Malicki Sanchez. Keram is an award-winning media and event producer, composer, writer, game virtual reality, web XR, and experience developer and curator. He's been named one of the top 100 original voices in XR and received Creator of the Year at the Polys Awards. He's also the founder of FIVARS, the Festival of International Virtual and Augmented Reality Stories, and executive director of the RTO Virtual and Augmented Reality World Conference. And today he's going to be walking us through a creative workflow using Blender and the Godot engine, showing us how we can go from modeling to publishing in VR, all using open source tools. So I'm going to hand this over to Keram. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm honored to be invited. Um, so I have this style where I'm not very formal in my approach. I kind of do a little bit of stream of consciousness, but I think that I can show you. I don't really know where all of you are at in terms of your journey, really, in terms of 3D modeling or XR development. I would assume everybody knows everything, and I will also pretend like everybody knows nothing. So that way we'll have a happy medium. Nice to see you, Yvonne, one of my former students. We had a lot of fun, and nice to see you, Jackie, and everybody else. So yes, my name is Keram. I do run the Festival of International Virtual and Augmented Reality Stories, aka 5Rs, and it is in its 11th year now. And the VRTO conference is in its 10th year. So, as the result of that, I have been able to look at a lot of work that may never hit a marketplace or never see the light of day, but could be the output of years of people's efforts. And what I've learned is that there are some basic bottlenecks that prevent things from being seen more. They could be as simple as how you start an experience and how you close an experience. If I'm running a festival and I need to run your experience through 50 people a day, it should have a really clean and clear way to restart or exit. And you'd be shocked at how many times you have to do a hard reboot on something. So thinking through the UI and the UX and all of that stuff is just an important part of just flow through and throughput of people being able to look and appreciate your work. Another part of it is, of course, optimization. And actually, what part two is, please watch your own work in VR and in 360 video. I think sometimes people don't even put on the headset at some point because I see titles that are way too big for the screen or things that are positioned in the wrong place. And, you know, eat your own dog food, as they say, and make sure that everything feels good, that the eye position is good. Think through accessibility, features. And I'll show you a case where that was a big deal on a project that we worked on. Anyways, the third point is optimization. It's something to go buy expensive assets on Turbo Squid and CG Trader and Envato Elements and Kitbash. It's another thing to know how to bring them in to Blender, or any software suite that can handle models and correctly improve their performativity by understanding the impact of materials and textures and the difference between materials and textures. When I had to convert my conference into a WebXR event using white label version of Mozilla Hubs, which was a online multi-user WebXR environment, I also had to learn very quickly about what I could and couldn't get away with. Um, it was exciting to have the option to use interesting shaders and physically based rendered materials, PBRs, and so on. But then you found out when you tried to export that as a GLB file and drag it into another platform that half of those materials were missing or they didn't look like what you expected. So I learned about the lovely art of having to bake materials down and also and so baking is a process, of course, in where you will hook up your procedurally generated material. Let me just start to show you things so I don't get too into the world of abstract. I'll just make a cube here and we'll give it a material. First of all, I want to kind of show of hands who knows anything about Blender at all. And if you can put on a video, I love to see your face because I can just read your Twitch responses to whether I'm on the page or not on the page with you. I don't care if you're eating a hot dog. You could be walking your dog. It's totally fine for me. But I do appreciate being able to have that exchange. Um, so basically, let me see again. Who's got Blender knowledge? Hands up if you do. Okay, good. Some. And would you consider yourself a beginner or advanced? Advanced? No. Okay. Okay. So like again, I'll just go from nothing and maybe it'll fill in some gaps. So when I teach Blender, the first thing I ask people to do is to not use menus. I say, please learn the fundamental keyboard commands because once you have those in your muscle memory, you can flow from your thoughts onto the screen, stay focused on what you're doing, and not have to go pixel hunting around this crazy cockpit UI for whatever it might be that's nested that you don't even know that you don't know. So the first thing I would do is I would hit Shift A to open this add menu, and then I would go and make our famous old cube. Something that's interesting is on this XYZ, you can see that it is actually, its origin is right drop dead in the middle, and I can right click it and change its origin to a different place, including where I put this 3D cursor, I could change its origin, and it's represented by that little dot. But there's a cool plugin that I use called Origins on the Floor. And what it does is if I hit Control and down arrow, it puts the origin right on the bottom. And if I hit Alt and G, Alt will reset the transform. So it'll reset its position, its rotation, or its scale. So I'll hit that, and now my cube is nice and flat on the floor and not going through the middle. This section here is your scene inspector, and it's a good place to see what the heck is in your scene. And I also recommend that as soon as you have an inkling of what this cube will become, to name it that. So let's just call this cube the Keram material cube, okay? And then I'll remember which one it is. Sometimes you might end up making a zebra, and by the time it gets to your project, it's called Cube 007, which is terrible. Now, with this cube selected, I will hit new. Now, see, these are all properties. And so you have everything from how you will render it, what render engine you're using. You could be in Eevee, which is a fast previewer that does an amazing job. What's one of the reasons why Blender is famous? It does this amazing job at showing you previews of materials, sheen and shininess, and even some basic shadowy effects and stuff, but it's an approximation. It's not going to give you reflections. It's not going to give you ray tracing. And if you want that kind of photorealistic stuff or those more accurate light paths and so on, you would go to cycles. And as soon as you do, you want to jump into your GPU mode. You don't want to calculate all of your ray tracing and reflections on your CPU, obviously. So just to give you an idea of what these things are, um, I I might typically, if I'm modeling, just use workbench mode, which is also called dev mode or called solid mode. And I can switch between those render modes with the Z key, which brings up a radial menu. I can open and close the side stuff, all these little tabs, which show the properties of any add-ons or other item properties I might be interested in with the N key. And the left side, I can open and close with the T key. So those are always true. Another cool thing is I can drag the left side, and if I do it a little bit, I can see all of my icons in two columns. And if I go further, I can see the actual names of these strange abstracted symbols. So a review: T for left, N for right, and Z to go between these different render modes. Right now, I'm in solid mode, which means it's using the least amount of calculations and everything else. So it's super fast. I could even run this on a Mac Airbook if I had to, and that's fine. You can. But once you get into cycles mode, you might notice that your computer crunches down. And that's one of the reasons we want to talk about optimization. Another cool thing that you may or may not know or be interested in knowing is, as you can see at a certain angle, this is pretty hard to tell what's going on. So I can see there's a gray square here, but I can't really tell where that edge is, or even if there is an edge, it could be like an arrow for all I know. And one of the free helpers that you get in Blender is if you click on this little chevron at the end of the render view modes, you get this studio lighting, and you can actually switch between different kinds of lighting, which is virtualized. This is free. It's not really doing any calculations here. Or you can even pretend that you have a material that has some properties. So if I go to matte caps, I can click here and get either a sort of normal map previsor type, or I could get some zebra stripes or some satin metallic sheen. And that helps me figure out a little better what I'm looking at. However, if you want to do something with a material, then you have to make sure that you're not in solid mode, because you'll not see it and you'll be confused as to why none of the things you're doing is taking an effect. So you can either click on the material preview mode, or you can click the Z key and open up the, uh, where is it? I am already in material preview mode. Yeah. So into this material preview mode. Going down this list here of icons, you're just dealing with different properties of workflows. So for example, that one was for rendering. The second one, which looks like a printer, is what's the size of the frame that you're dealing with, what's the first and end frame of your animation, what's the format you would like to output in, where's the folder that you'd like to output in. And then you've got your layers, scene properties, your world properties, where you could change the background, um, your collection. So a collection is like a folder that you can turn on or off. So it's a way to organize a project. You could say, I'm going to make one collection for spaceships and another one for planets. And then it's easy to simply turn off what you don't want. Um, Notice too how my properties icons changed. I only have a few now because I have not got my original object selected. And where am I right now? Let's see. I'm in object mode. Select, click my box. Okay. Um, that is a good question, actually. Where am I? So let's see. Go back here. Okay. And so I have all my properties back because Blender as a UI is highly context specific. In other words, if my arrow is on this part of the screen and I hit certain keyboard commands, they may not activate. If I'm here, then they will. So even where you're hovering is going to affect certain keyboard commands that you might press. Similarly, the object that you currently have selected is going to affect what you see here. I currently don't see the checkerboard texture icon because this doesn't have a texture on it. And I also don't see the green light bulb icon here because there's no light in the scene. But what's the keyboard command to open the add menu? Someone tell me. Okay, I'm going to let you cheat this one time. Shift A. Shift A opens this add menu. All right, this is the stuff I want you to remember. Shift A, I can go and get access to all my stuff. Look, you could do it the long way and go all the way up here and click it here. It's the same menu, but wouldn't it be nice if I was just right here and I could just pop it open as I need it? Now I'll add a light, let's say a spotlight. And now you can see that with that light selected, I have a light bulb icon here. And now I can adjust its properties. And I can actually change the kind of light that this is. I'm not committed to what I originally chose. I can change it to a spot or directional light. I could change it to a point or omni light. I could change it to an area light. However, notice that when I do, its original name is the same. So I got to remember to go and rename that thing if I decide to change it to something else so I know what I'm talking about. Um, I'm not going to go down the light rabbit hole right now. I'm just pointing out that icons appear and disappear depending on what's in your scene and what you have selected. Okay. So if I pick this again and I make my way down, I can look at the object data properties. So it has its transforms like location on XYZ, its rotation, and its scale. And notice that these are zeroed out and they're at 111. This mode that I'm in right now, and my apologies to the Blender power users here, this mode is called object mode. Object mode is a place where I can stage things, right? I have a couch. I maybe have a cardboard cutout of a couch, but I'm just placing it in the room to see where it's got a good vibe. I'm not actually affecting this couch with like hammer and nails and chainsaws and whatever else. I'm just placing it. The reason I say that is because if I scale this up, by the way, I hit the S to scale. Okay. So these are the three keys I want you to know. G to grab. That's how you move stuff around. You can't just click it and drag it. It doesn't work. G to grab, S to scale, R to rotate. G to grab, S to scale, R to rotate. And notice it's rotating from that origin point that I set at the bottom, okay? Before I click a second time, I can also hit escape and just kidding. So if I hit S to scale and I'm like, just kidding, I hit escape and it goes back. If I did click, which was like hitting enter or commit, I can hit Control Z to undo it. And I can also see that this is still not back to its original size. If you look at its transform, it's currently at 1.567 scale. Why am I pointing this out? Because if you were to go to the next property and add a modifier, let's say something like cool, like an array. No, let's say like a screw. And now I want to screw this thing up and I can change it on different axes or whatever. What's important to understand is that I am operating on the original scale of this object, not the one where I scaled it up. So it could have a very serious impact on what I think I'm doing because I'm working on a 111 meter square, which I then scaled up to 1.57 times. And then I'm applying a modifier thinking that I'm not getting the results I want because I'm working on its original scale. So how do I solve this problem? Well, you can Control A, here's another keyboard command, to open the apply menu. And this allows you to apply transforms, okay? So let's scroll up here where I can see those exact same properties that I was looking at in the object data mode. See, they're exactly the same. And I can see that this is scaled up to 1.567. Now, if I Control A, I can apply its location, which is fine. It wasn't displaced from its original spot. I can hit scale, and now see this all becomes 111. So this is now the new native scale of this cube upon which I can act. This is different than going into the edit mode, which I enter by hitting the tab key. Now all kinds of things happen, right? The whole side menu changes. I now see that, okay, sure, this object is highlighted, but I also see that there are vertices. What's a vertex? A vertex is a point in 3D space. In this case, I can see that there are edges, which is a line that connects two points, and I can see that there are faces, which is the area that fills in between those edges. Here's another keyboard shortcut. One allows me to go into vertex select mode, so I can select one vertex at a time, or I could shift lasso to multi-select those vertices. I can hit two to select a specific edge, or I could shift to select multiple edges. And of course, three allows me to select faces, and I can shift click to select multiple faces. Who wants to do a pop quiz on the keyboard commands I've done so far? Someone do it. Try it. For real. How do I move, rotate, and scale?
G, S, and R.
Yes, sir. How do I toggle between my three sub-object selection modes? Sub-objects being vertices, edges, and faces.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. How do I go between object and edit mode?
Yeah.
Tab key. Yvonne, you're cheating. You took my class for 12 weeks. All right. So see, this is super easy. It seems like a lot, but it's actually not. There's about 12 to 15 commands that are all that power modelers use to do literally everything. Everything. They could go down into, and the way that I obviously recommend that it's not obvious maybe, that you use Blender and you learn Blender is you do a very specific goal, right? It's everything is on a need to know basis. I could teach this for 20 years and I wouldn't get to the bottom of the literally 2,000-page PDF manual. So it's just, you don't learn it that way. You go, I need to make a cat for my friend to print out for their daughter's birthday. And then you work on how do I make a cat? And there's this great, great book called Art and Fear. In it, there's this analogy or this parable of a guy who said, okay, I've got two groups in my class. There's the A group and the B group. The A group, it's pottery class. The A group is going to get an A by the volume of pottery that they make. So by poundage, you make me 500 pounds of pottery, you get an A. The B group only has to make one, and it has to be perfect. After that 6 weeks, who do you think made better pots? The group that made hundreds of terrible pots made way better stuff than the one that tried to get one down, because the first group kept practicing and crashing and burning and learning and trying different approaches and learning from their mistakes. Blender's the same. Don't be precious about your thing. In my early days, I would go down these things where I would say, oh man, I messed this up and now I've got to untangle it. And I got to go in and clean up all these vertices from this volumetric capture on my iPhone. And 3 days later, I had more spaghetti than I'd started with and sheer frustration. It would have been faster to throw the whole project out, just do it again from what I learned. Oh, I learned this technique. This is faster. This is better. I learned a different technique. Don't be precious about it. You can always make free cubes. They are not expensive. So truly like iterate fast. Just do things and throw them away and don't be precious about them because you'll learn more and have a specific output in mind. So my students, when I bring them in, I go, okay, here's a couple of things about the UI, whatever your goal for next week is to make me a tree. 3 trees, in fact. And I know every single tree tutorial, and you can't use a tutorial. And there's the ones that just kind of go for it and make terrible trees and they're on their way. And then there's the ones that are like, oh, I couldn't figure it out. It's too hard. It doesn't look good. And I try to bring them around and I say, okay, now let's make a fence. Now let's make a sign. Now let's make a house. And then you go, now put those all together. And now you have a house with a fence and a sign and trees, and you've made a scene. In 5 weeks, you've made your own scene from scratch. But the point is that you learned how to not go menu hunting and like thinking, what does all of this mean? I mean, look at it all. If you're goal and object oriented specific, then you will get the things that you need at the time. Okay. So that's my crash course in the fundamentals of Blender, but that it's just really important to understand the difference between object mode and edit mode. So if I go into edit mode and I go into vertex selection mode, anything I do now is permanent and destructive. And let's say I thought, oh, cool. So Karam showed me how to make cubes. So I'm going to spam another cube in here. I'll go Shift A and maybe I'll add a cube and then whatever. And then I'll deal with that cube later. And then I go back to object mode and I realize, oh, this is all the same object now. I can't actually separate these things. I was destructively working on this and they're fused together. And the only thing I could do now is either undo. Hopefully, I set my undo in the preferences to more than 32 steps. I would set it to like 500, frankly. But what if I did a bunch of important stuff after those undos? Well, the good news is I can go to this undo history and I can see every single thing I did, but that still might not save me because, everything that came after came after. So it's important to understand whether you're in edit mode or object mode. Object mode, if I make another cube, it has sovereignty. It's its own thing. It just like lives over here and it doesn't care what else I do to the other thing. So here's my Keram material cube and here's my new cube, which I'll now call new cube. And with this new cube selected, when I hit tab to go into edit mode, only it is going to be affected now. The other one is safe. It's fine. I can't even break it. So edit is going to affect the thing that was selected before you went into edit mode. Okay. Now I can grab these vertices and I can use the same keys, G to grab, S to scale. Maybe even I can rotate. Okay, so cool. This other one's getting in my way, so I'm going to go here to the scene inspector and turn off the eye. Now I can just see the one I'm working on. And so here I am in good old destructive edit mode, and I'm moving things around. And I get really excited that, wow, I learned how to make an interesting shape in just a few minutes with G, R, and S in edit mode. And then I come back and I think this is super. I'm going to send it out to the game engine and I'm going to apply a material and nothing's working the way that I expected it to. And that's because in the process of dragging one vertex through another face, I have started to flip normals. Well, thank mercy that there is a tool to help me see the trouble I'm in. Here is an icon called overlays. It can be completely turned off. And if I do turn it off, you can see that my grid goes away. All of my my Cartesian axis helpers go away. Any other things go away. I can turn it back on. And then I can drop down and come here to where it says face orientation. And I can see that this red stuff is the back of a face. That's the back of your normal. So for anybody who doesn't know what a normal is, my street description of it would be the direction that a pixel is facing. And a face has a front and it has a back. And the reason it matters is because the front part is going to be calculated by your GPU and say, hey, like, let's do stuff to this surface. And the back of it is generally going to be culled. It's just not going to draw it because it doesn't need to be seen. So you have a front and you have a back. The red part here is the back, which means if I spit this thing out, that's not going to be rendered. I made a big old mess. I can actually go back into edit mode and I can select these faces, for example. And there's better ways to multi-select, but I could just shift and select them. And now I could hit Alt N and open the normals menu and I could flip those normals. Well, sort of. These ones are attached to them and they're on the other side. And boy, am I glad I knew this now and not 6 hours from now when I have to fix this whole problem. So you want to keep these things in mind, right? When you're working, you want to know, like, what mode am I working in? Have I applied my transforms before I try to add modifiers to them? Am I aware of which direction my normals are facing? And where's the origin of this thing around which I'm working? These are all optimization tools that help you get it right. And you will make a lot of spaghetti at the beginning, a lot. And like I said, just don't try to save the spaghetti. Just throw it out, do it again. That's the best way to learn. And you know, this pretty thing I made, I'm gonna just nuke it. See ya, never knew ya. Um, Here, looking up at this scene thing, I can look at my abomination or my work of art, however you want to see it. But there's another icon beside it, which is a camera icon, and this is the render icon. If I turn it off, nothing appears to happen. But actually, what it means is if I was to, we're going to do a little parenthetical here. I'm going to hit the N key and go to view. So here's my viewing of the scene, right? And instead of dragging the camera around, I'm going to just hit camera to view. And then this little camera icon. What that does is now whatever I see is what the camera is looking at. Instead of me having to drag that camera around everywhere. Why I'm showing you this is because I'm going to hit F12 to render. Well, we're not going to see much because I don't have any lighting in here really. Let me see. Yeah. Let me do a little bit of lighting. So we'll add a light. Like let's add like a sun or something. I can also move my lights around with the same G, whatever. And let's go to, yeah, that's good. There's something kind of goofy with my screen right now because I'm not seeing all of my render modes. So let's see, rendered wireframe. Yeah, that's odd. Anyways, if I was to render this, oh yeah, well, I'm a victim of my own success here. See, look, I turned off this render icon, the camera, so it doesn't render. So if I turn it back on and I hit F12, it does render. See the difference? So that's what this means. This is also true for exporting, okay? This camera, this guy right here, this camera. This is also true for exporting. I'll show you why I mean this. So I'll go back to solid mode. I will turn back on my overlays. You don't need to know the key shortcut key for that. That's Alt Z if you want to turn on or off your um actually no, that's your X-ray mode. Okay. Anyway, you're being confusing, Keram. Okay. So yes, I'm gonna delete this work of art too. I'm gonna toggle out of camera mode. I have a blank screen again. I'm gonna make a cube, Shift A, cube. And I'm going to do something with a Boolean cutout. So what that means is I will make a second object. Let's say it's like a cylinder. And I will go with that object selected, I will go to modifiers. And although we don't have time to get into modifiers, it could be less intimidating if you just recognize that these are categories that mean something. So you have generate, deform, normals, physics. This used to all be a giant flyout menu, and then they collapsed it. So now it's just these things, but you can always just search if you know what you're doing for Boolean. And a Boolean basically lets me use one object to cut away from another object. So if I've got my cylinder selected and I drop my cube, and let's say I, with my cylinder, scale it up a little bit, and I turn it off, you could see that one is cutting out of the other. The way I do that is I get one to intersect the other, and then I turn off the one that is the cutter, right? The thing that's cutting away, I can just make it be invisible. But when you go to export and you don't turn off the render thing, both of those shapes will be in the exported shape. So it's not just for when you're taking pictures, but when you export your objects, any objects that should be invisible should also not render, or you will have them all. Does that make sense? If I still got you all with me? Okay. Get rid of this. Get rid of this. Let's talk about materials for a second. I'm just going to make a brand new Blender file. Okay. Shift A, cube, control down arrow to move my origin to the bottom. By the way, that's a 99-cent plugin on the artist formerly known as Blender Market. It's not built in. And then Alt G to reset my transform. So again, I could be Alt G for reset the location, Alt R to reset the rotation, and Alt S to reset the scale. Now, let's go to this materials properties icon at the bottom here, which I call a volleyball, and we'll hit new. But before I do that, I also want to alert you to this. Okay, so does anybody want to explain to me what a material is? I don't do this to humiliate you. I just do this to make sure we're all engaged and not phasing out. Does anybody know what a material is? Go for it.
It's a texture that like adds a photorealistic covering to your object.
Some of that's true. There is a difference between a texture and a material. So that's one thing that can be confusing. You're right. Nothing you said is wrong, but I would make a distinction. A texture is basically how do I map color across a surface, pixels. So video can be a texture because it's just pixels in locations over time. It's also a JPEG. That's a texture. It's where do colors go to make the impression of a cat. But a material is not a texture. A material is an artist's briefcase that holds a whole bunch of stuff. It's got spray cans, it's got varnish, it's got color paint, it has gritty, bumpy sand that you can glue to it. It has shaders, which are calculations about how that thing reacts over time. A material is a suitcase that has a bunch of stuff. And this here, where's my mouse? Come back to me, mouse. Where are you? Here you are. This is an empty wall unit that has no shelves, but I'm going to add some shelves. So I'm going to click this plus sign here, and now there is a shelf that they call a slot. Now I'm going to add another slot. Now I'm going to go to the first slot, and in it, I'm going to say, make a new material. Now it has a material. Okay, but I'm going to delete those with the minus key. And I could have just said new, and it would have made me a slot with a material. But that's something that people might miss. Those slots are meaningful because I could have 10 different materials. Now, in object mode, only the top material is going to be the one assigned. I cannot assign multiple materials to an object in object mode. But in edit mode, I could do that because now you see all of a sudden this assign thing showed up, which means I could just choose one face and assign it to just that side. So let's change the color of this material to green, and I'll assign it. And you can't see it because I'm in solid mode, but if I go into material preview mode, you can see it. And it's covering the whole cube right now because that material was assigned to the whole cube in object mode. But just to make my point, let me make a second material. I'll make a slot for it. I'll hit new. I'll change this one to like purple or whatever. My mouse is being sticky. Okay. And I will assign that one to this face. Now you can see that I have two materials assigned to this cube. Pay attention to this part, draw calls. A draw call is costly. People in the game space are always going on about draw calls and optimization. Does anybody know what a draw call is? A draw call is a call from the CPU, which is making all the calculations on your computer, to the GPU, which is highly optimized to handle graphic stuff. And every time there's a draw call, the CPU says, hey, I got an order for you. I got another order for you. Now I got 6 million orders for you, and I need you to update those every frame in each eye for VR and maintain 90 frames per second. So it's a problem. A draw call is one material per object. So how many draw calls does this scene have in it right now? Per material, per object, 2. And if I duplicate this thing, how many draw calls are there in the scene? 4. So what you can do is you could take this and bake it into what would be called the texture atlas. And it would say, all right, take all the materials, pretend you've got a giant emulsion sheet for photo, what's it called when you expose a photo? Develop a photo. So I have a giant emulsion sheet, and this part is going to be the pink part, and this part's going to be the green part. And then I can just say, all right, let's map that back onto the cube, and it's just one draw call now. And in fact, if I had 40 cubes and I did a texture atlas of all of that scene, I could make that one texture that's mapped across the whole scene, and it's still one draw call. It's hard to do, but that's how you do it. Okay, so it's interesting. There's a difference between how this material workflow works in edit mode versus an object mode.
There is a question in the chat. What is skinning? It's going back a few minutes.
Sure. I guess that's what I'm doing is I'm skinning this thing. I'm just adding a skin to it. So now that I have made a material, note there are 2 materials. I'm just going to do something to make sure that you also don't ever make this mistake. So I'm going to make a 3rd slot, and I'm going to call this like the material that time forgot. Okay. These 2 first materials have what's called a user. A user is not a license that you pay for one of your staff to use this product. A user is not a person that's using Blender. A user is an object in this scene that is using something. That cube is the user. Those 2 first materials have a user. That 3rd material does not have a user. If I was to close this scene right now, that material would disappear. It would be gone. It would be flushed. This is true of a lot of things in Blender. Textures, materials, all kinds of stuff. If it doesn't have a user, it's considered orphaned, and it gets garbage cleaned when you close Blender. Even if you save the Blender project, they're gone. That could cause a lot of trouble. That's why you make a asset library and drag your awesome material of burning fire that you made or whatever. You drag it into we cannot get into asset libraries right now, but now you know about them. Go look them up on YouTube because they're freaking awesome and they're weird to do. But the good news is I can protect this poor young material by clicking this shield icon, which gives it a fake user. That's what a fake user is. A fake user is I'm going to just pretend like it has a user, and that way it won't throw it out. Got that? That's the shield. Anytime you see this shield, you can assign something a fake user. Okay. All the way across here are a bunch of, just call them, they're not complicated things. They're just prefab templates, layouts for your window. That's all they are. So this one is called modeling. It starts in edit mode. This one's called sculpting. It starts with all of these cool clay tools for pushing and pulling and scraping and dragging your super subdivided mesh. This one's called UV editing. I've got 14 minutes. Do I talk about UV editing? I've got texture painting where I could paint right onto the model, like do cool shading. And this is the one I want to talk about right now is shading. It looks totally different, but I can see my material broken out into nodes now. And do not be afraid of the nodes. I can also hit Shift A like I did in object mode, and I get another add menu right here. And just like the modifiers, it's all broken down very cleanly into categories. Thank you, Blender org. Inputs, outputs, color tools like hue saturation, contrast, mixing. Converters change one thing to another using math. Shaders. Shaders are like guitar pedals. You have a distortion pedal, you have a reverb pedal, a delay pedal, something goes in. stuff happens and then something comes out. Okay, that's what shaders are. These are just prefab shaders that focus more or less on some things. Metallic is going to make stuff look more metallic. Glossy is going to be good at glossy. But you could build that all by yourself. It's just that that's what these are. They're just prefabs. Textures. Let me show you a cool texture. Let's go with a magic texture. This is a procedural texture, which means it's being generated real time on the fly. I'll take the color of that and I'll drag it to the base color of my material. Let me see here. Let's see, which material am I even talking to right now? Oh, see, I'm talking to the material that time forgot, which is not assigned. Let's go to this material. Note that it's a totally different deal. That material's got that thing going on. This one's got this thing going on. This one's got this thing going on. I'll hit Shift A and I will go like, but you can do copying, by the way. You can do it. So let me go to texture, magic texture, color. Okay, there. So now I've assigned it a procedural texture. What is a texture? It's a bunch of color pixels doing something on a surface. I could change this in real time because it's being computed right now. I could change the scale of it. I could do all this stuff, get really psychedelic, and then I'll spit it out. No, I won't, because only Blender can do this calculation right now. When I spit it out to Unity or Unreal, it doesn't know. It's like it's got its own thing. I'd have to bake this. I have to commit this into a photograph that becomes a texture, which is a picture of where pixels should be. Okay, that's the difference between a texture and a material. Material's got all this stuff going on. I could also make it shiny. So I could take the roughness all the way down because, sand is not shiny. And now it's shiny. And I could also take it back up. So that's just this material called material 002, which I've got assigned. Why am I telling you this when I'm talking about optimization? Because you might go and buy an asset that says 4K textures on your awesome spaceship. And you think that's got to be the one because it's going to look the best. If you take one picture on your phone of your grandkid, that's like 80 megabytes on a good day. That is more than your entire budget for a WebXR scene. Let me show you what I mean by that. When I had to do this government project, I have a budget. They said, okay, we're not going to support anything that is going to have a socioeconomic barrier that people have to have expensive computers and graphics cards to run. It's got to run on any phone, going back to a Samsung S7. It has to load in real time, no proprietary software, no special drivers. It's got to be trilingual. It's got to be used for screen readers. I was like, all right, challenge accepted. So, we've got all of our affordances for like accessibility here, what you can expect, how they work. Anyways, the bottom line is that this thing, even when I go into this portal and I load what was originally a 14 million poly volumetric capture of this guy and his drum, my whole budget for this scene is 50 megabytes. His pants, his shirt, the frills, the fringes on his thing, the bead work. And you might be like, he kind of looks kind of lame. This had to be consolidated from all of those different textures and sheens and roughness into a single baked texture atlas that was performant. They put these glasses on because they didn't capture well in VolCap. The glasses were like 14 million polys. Like they were taking up more than the whole scene. And I was like, guy, you can't do that. You got to find a better way. So this is why optimization is important, because I could stick these in and this loaded instantly. And this even has like a video wall, and we built a custom video player, and it has to play in real time. And we even have a real-time translation of those captions into English, Spanish, and French. And then we go over here to our, hang on one second, let me see here. We have a 360 theater, and this thing is something we've been developing for, I don't know, 6, 7 years now, where it has to play full 4 to 6K video. It should come in, yeah, 4 to 6K video instantly, no buffer time. That 3, 2, 1 was just so you could put on your headset. It wasn't buffer time. It has to play this in real time, playback. And all that this is a texture mapped to the inside of a sphere created in Blender with the normals flipped to face inside. And you're just standing in the middle of that sphere. But think of how optimized this has to be to do what I'm showing you right now. And you're probably seeing a compressed version in Zoom, but it looks awesome on my side. And then you click out and you have to come back into this room and it has to load whoosh like that. Okay. So that's an hour, but I'll show you one more thing. I'm going to make a case for this because I promised that I would if I can find it. Let's see here. Yes, Godot engine. So most people are sleeping on Godot engine. You might be into Unity, right? You might be into 3 hours waiting for it to open or to download or to install the 1.6 gigabyte point 1 version update. I got no hate for Unity. Most of the stuff I've ever put in my festivals in Unity or Unreal Engine. This whole program is 300 megabytes. You can run this program on a Casio watch. You can literally make VR inside of VR in Meta on this thing. You can run this and compile on your phone. It's very, very small. It's also free. It will never have a paid license. You can make whatever you want and release whatever you want on any platform, and no one's going to come knocking on your door when you make $1 million. They have really good XR support right now. They've partnered with the Kronos Group. They've partnered with Meta. In fact, someone from Meta works at Godot, which is an open source organization. They got a huge influx of cash when Unity was doing wacky stuff with its licensing, and now cash is now starting to show up in the ecosystem. It took me an afternoon of paying attention to a couple of tutorials to get full VR. I mean, walk, glide, teleport, rotate, fly, climb, slide, and output it to an APK that was running on my Meta Quest. Okay. I'm not even joking. I just did a couple of drag and drop nodes and it was working. You just have to follow a couple of quick things and install the Android builder and it was done. Done. So, okay, we have 5 minutes left. I'm going to hand this back to Lauren.
There are a couple questions in the chat. What is the recommended hardware to run Blender?
Just a GPU, just a dedicated GPU. So if you've got a computer and it says it's running on an Intel, you're going to have a lot of trouble. But if you have an NVIDIA or an AMD card in there, you should be fine. Just make sure that in Blender, you go up and you tell it, it should automatically do it. But if you go up here to Preferences and System, make sure that you've got that checked. So I want my NVIDIA card checked, not my Intel card. It was another question.
Yes. Do you have a link for the Cultural Heritage Project you shared?
Absolutely. It is going to be museum.chlavm.ca. CHLAVM stands for the Canadian Hispanic Latin American Virtual Museum.
Great. Another question about screen readers, and this might be more of a future note, but would love to hear more about screen readers in the future and what kind of interactions, experiences are feasible for all audiences or best practices for alternatives.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So actually, to make it really accessible, let's run it through people who actually have those accessibility concerns and see how it goes. So we did a lot of testing. We did it with someone who was completely blind, someone who had low vision, and someone who could only control the screen with their eyes or their head movements. And each of them has different tools, and none of those are off the shelf. They are like these weird Frankenstein things where it's like, I use this to get the first part going, and then this to do the reading aloud, and then I do this thing to accelerate it, and this thing to be compatible with Edge. And you won't know that unless you run that test. You got to run the test with those people, and you got to do it early on. So, we had because we didn't build a custom content management system for this thing, there was no budget to do that. We were starting from zero. We had to basically hard code every single part of it times every room. There was about 4,300 lines of code in each of those scenes. Most of it is just to do language translation, JavaScript controls. But once we had finished it, the screen reader guy came in and he goes, okay, I'm trying to find a menu of any kind, a button. And it's going like, first of all, this is what it sounds like to a person who's using a screen reader. It literally sounds like this. You're like, what is that? And they're like, that's English. They hear it about 600 to 700 times speed because they've spent their whole life listening to it that. Like, so they have to go through my entire metadata, all of my stupid commenting, like every other thing in my code before they even got to the go button. And then we realized, oh man, we're going to have to reflow this entire code to get the screen reader to hear it properly, to put the menu buttons in the right order, not in the programmer's order. And that's what we had to do. So that's what they were able to hear. The low vision folks said, oh, hey, you know that cool 3D text that you are like flexing up at the front there. That's got that background against the thing. So notice how these are gold over blue. They used to be over this lovely sunset color, and they could not distinguish those two from each other. They were just one color. And also things were concentrate like for them, they're zooming their screen in 600 times. So it's like giant. And all they could see was like the little tip of the sun. And they had to go way over to even find this button or that thing. So it had to all be responsive so that on their screen, things would collapse towards the center. It's a big job. But it's good to start being on that journey. And we didn't even have these cool I Dream of Genie shaders on these portals until like 6 months after it launched. They used to be static, but they weren't showing up really well. The light was kind of washing them out. And then we said, oh, let's just go over to Shader Toy and find a cool shader that will work. If you've never been to Shader Toy, this will change your life. Like that is just this code. That's it. That's all that it is. And I can now map that code onto any surface of my world. And that's all that those are. They're just shaders that we mapped onto those surfaces. So you could see this is all like procedural real-time shaders. Any final questions?
I think that's all, but thank you so much for Keram for joining us. We really appreciate this awesome session, and thank you for everyone for coming. Our next session will be with the award-winning VR expert Jackie Mori on June 3rd at 2 p.m. So Jackie will be discussing design considerations for immersive VR projects. So we're really excited to be having her next month. So thank you everyone for coming, and thanks again, Keram.
Thanks for hosting. I'll see y'all in the future.
Yeah, see you in the future. Thanks.
Bye.